Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Today's guest is Felix Torralba, the Chief Revenue Officer at Real Mallorca. With a name that means White Tower, Torralba stands tall, leading several new fan experience, marketing, and engagement initiatives. Digital house calls to fans, streaming on Twitch, and creating their own documentary are only 3 examples of initiatives recently taken by the Spanish club. Let's find out more. Felix Torralba, welcome to the Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
It's my pleasure to have you here on the podcast, and you are the Chief Revenue Officer at Real Mallorca, the football club. So can you tell us a little bit about your role there?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I joined Real Mallorca recently this season, and basically my job as a chief revenue officer is to, let's say, coordinate, oversee, and maximize the activity of different departments that are in charge of generating the revenues for the team. Meaning we're talking about ticketing and hospitality, commercial and marketing, everything related to fan experience, which I think nowadays is a unit by itself, and communications, which obviously is also one of the main streams that we get in touch with our fan base and with our customers as well, and the family of RCD Mallorca. So maybe very short would be to make sure the left arm knows what the right one is doing, and that both arms or all the different departments, let's say, go in one direction. And that allows us also to put a little bit of mid and long-term approach in our commercial activities and the revenue streams of the club.
Yes, and you are joining the team in an interesting time from a fan experience perspective, because you are coming in right after COVID, and also because Mallorca is now playing in La Liga, the highest division. So how has that affected the club?
Well, I mean, first of all, yes, it's absolutely a great moment for the club, right? Being in La Liga obviously is getting the maximal opportunities, and it's really where the fun begins, let's say, no? Obviously, in terms of the pandemic and of the COVID, and I think that's nothing unique to the football, but to every industry and in all sports industry, things have changed. Things have changed temporarily, but also on the mid and long term. I think there are things that have been changing and adapting to stay. So we have changed the patterns. We consume sports. We have changed the patterns. We get engaged with people, with clubs, with different operations in our day-to-day lives. I'd say maybe from a club's perspective, initial diagnosis is clear, is there is a lot of challenges, no? Because you lose the pure connection with the fan, which is the match day. So the competition continued, but we didn't have the fans in the stadium, and that's where you obviously interact the most until now. So that has made us change the way we communicate, we open the doors, we engage with that fan. And I think we have done really a very interesting or very good job at Real Mallorca. Our goal was to put the fan in the middle, to do a fan-centric approach in terms of, hey, how can we, putting us in his skin or her skin, still be there and be a positive impact to the fans, no? And I think there has been, for example, we created or launched an own OTT platform, for example, that allowed us not only to still communicate and make the fan be in our day-to-day lives, no, with specific content, but also giving them voice, giving our fans voice in the club. So we visited some fans in the houses and shared with them what we are doing, what they are doing, how they are focusing, how they're doing, following the activity of the club. We had, I think it was very great opportunity also to find out that we could do much better than we were doing in granting behind the scenes accesses and finding, out of the challenges, the opportunities. And some of them have been very successful, or some of them have been very well received by fans. So we have to take learnings out of it. I think that is also something, when challenges come, there is an opportunity, there is learnings, and it has changed the way we communicate, and we we engage with our fans also on every area, also commercial. So after that, I think we have learned, and there are things that are going to stay in the way our day-to-day lives of a football club. And obviously, it's still going to be changing, the landscape on how people consume sports, from purchasing merchandising. I think everyone goes online, so you have to really make sure your online services, online access, online store, additional experiences on a ticket, because you expect to see more, because we have been opening the doors from a different point of view during pandemic. So I think it has been a learning, but again, I think we've managed quite well and continue to learn on a day-to-day basis. No?
Yeah. I think it's the first time I've heard a club doing house calls. I've heard about them calling up fans, but I've never heard them actually going to their houses. So did you bring some players and knocked on the door, or how did that go?
It was virtual. So we set up, obviously, the very, very strict pandemic times in Spain. We were closed in and couldn't leave our houses. In that initial step, it was more like them setting up and just communicating with us and making interviews to fans to be able to share how they're going and navigating through these tough times. But then even us going and setting up with them and recording when that initial contact was already approved, so that they have a direct contact with the club, and then generating access. Like, for example, I think we have been very unique there. We have seen that the people wanted to consume us, wanted to be there, wanted to have those behind-the-scene access that we were generating throughout all the pandemics. And we have maintained, for example, we do during match days, for example, we obviously TV rights are sold, meaning they're consumed on bigger broadcasters, but we generate a multicam coverage of match days, for example, and that has stayed, and the people love it. So they're watching the match on TV, but on their phones or on the tablets or on their computers, they're watching the reactions of every bench, of the stands, of everything. So it's just generating more engagement for them. Or also, for example, we streamed the last hours of the transfer markets through Twitch. And I think things like that, the fans love it, because that's something where, they see how a club works and they see what we do. And then, again, we have nothing to hide. And I think that is something that makes us also very different, that we want to do things a bit different to make the fans be part of what we do.
That's amazing. And in one of the first episodes, I talked to Jeff Wilson, who does a lot of fan engagement as well. And he talks about the 4 aspects. So it's the match day when you are at the stadium, match day not at the stadium, and not match day at the stadium, not match day not at the stadium. So it's these 4 aspects. And it seems like with the OTG platform, with the connection with the fans, the house calls, the ticketing, the match games, it really seems like you have taken all of these things into consideration.
Absolutely. And I think that is a very good scheduling of the areas, of those match days for the people that come and for the people that cannot come. We are an international club and we want to grow internationally, obviously, and we have a huge fan base in Asian market, on the US, for example. So you have to make them also feel special and feel well treated and focus on those non-assisting match days, but also, and I think that is something that, for example, in my role is from a revenue or from a business opportunity side, not only when they come to the stadium, the whole journey is important. Once a fan has decided to come to the stadium and has purchased his ticket, can you accompany him? Can you go with him through the whole process? Once he's taken the decision, the way he's coming to the stadium, what he's doing at the stadium during his visit, but also then after the match, So I think the more we know, the more we share, the more we participate of that journey is where there is a lot of opportunities.
How do you work with gaining a larger fan base? You mentioned that you have some fans in Asia. And in my mind, if you are not from Mallorca, maybe the go-to clubs to support are Real Madrid, Barcelona, if you come from outside. So how do you win over the fans from abroad?
So I think that's a vast topic that we could be discussing for ages, right? So obviously, when you think of La Liga, you would think Madrid, Barcelona, even Atletico Madrid or Sevilla, which would be those international teams with a lot of presence in throughout all years. Mallorca is a very historic club. So we have a strong history behind us with European participations, great stars playing at the club. And obviously, the players are one of our assets in that terms, right? In terms of impacting fan base and of that international process. I think we have to focus as well on where we are. I think that is something that we have tattooed on our skin. We are Mallorca. Mallorca is an international destination, is a well-received destination. Mallorca stands for positive, reaction. When you think about Mallorca, generally your thoughts are positive. And that's something that we try to leverage in everything we do. For example, also making it easy for that. And that there's international growth, right? Not only national, but also international. We, on our pre-match shows that we were talking before, now it's 4 hours of content where we do interviews, where we bring in people. We do that live in Spanish, English, Japanese, Korean. So we try to make it accessible. We have adapted our way to communicate and integrate the people so that they can really be part of it, make it easy. That's our job. And I think that makes a lot. And then also deliver whatever you promise, you got to deliver. If you are, I don't know, if you want to consume Mallorca from abroad, we have to be able to deliver a great experience. If we are sending something, make sure that the whole process, your experience is good, because that speaks for itself, right? And yeah, step by step, I think there's a lot of things on the international aspect, and on growth, but it's about making sure who you are, what makes you different, and make it very simple for the other person to join your family.
Yeah, and I mean, the language barrier would obviously be one thing there. So great that you have so many languages represented in your streams. Another question that I thought about was, I know that you're new with the club, but how much with regards of the gaining fans and the fan experience do you get for free, in quotes, for being in La Liga versus the lower divisions?
That's also a good one. I think La Liga itself is an incredible institution. I mean, there are strong leagues around the world in different sports, but I think La Liga is really a front runner in many, many aspects now of a professional organization around sports. We have some great assets there, great value brought by La Liga, also with the international offices, with the brand La Liga itself, where we all go together towards the outside. But then, to be honest, it's very much about you. It's very much about how you as a club decide to make things work. We have, as you know, our property comes from the US, so most of us are quite young professionals, that have had international experience or worked in different countries and sports globally. So we try to be different in making ourselves very available, meaning we want to share what we do. The traditional football approach many times is, don't share, don't let this be seen, because it's always been like this, not because there is a reason for that. And I think obviously La Liga provides a lot of tools and opportunities, but then it's up to you how you want to make them unique, how you want to leverage those. And I think it starts with a fan-centric approach, as we were mentioning before. If you think and put yourself in the skin of a fan from Mallorca, a guy that has been with you for 50 years, but also of those young kids around the world that now see Japan and see Takekubo playing for Mallorca, or in the US, where football is growing, and see Matthew Hope as a youngster of the US team, in Mallorca. You have to decide and make it very simple for him to be part of, to feel, to understand what Mallorca stands for, what are your values, how you're going to share them, and I think we do a lot of things there. And match day, for example, we have a lot of meet and greet with the players after the match and experiential areas. So I think all that is part of the club. It's our job.
Very interesting. So during COVID, you mentioned that you really stepped up your digital game with regards to streaming on Twitch and doing digital house calls. Is this something that you will continue with also after COVID, or maybe even focus more on?
Absolutely. I think not only continue, but improve, right? Things that have worked, things that make sense, things that bring value are here to stay. So definitely we are now receiving people. We have no limitations anymore on capacity, but we're still doing our, pre, during, and post-match show with additional content and international coverage. We are still generating, and not only bigger documentary work and so on, but we are, we have defined a little bit the lines that we think belong to our jersey, right? The destination, La Liga, Mallorca is an island, and it's the paradise island, what we like to call it sometimes, and generate content on those cornerstones that we then share. And it's additional content that goes further than just what's happening on the pitch. It's going with our coach on a biking trip around the island and explaining what the island and what life here means, and then obviously going into details about the club and about the day-to-day. So I think that is an important part, because it gets emotional. People understand who the people behind it are, and generate those links, right, to the club.
Definitely. And I think that the Netflix documentary also with Drive to Survive with Formula One, and that has proven how much the fans want the behind the scenes content as well.
We have one documentary out there on a different platform. It's on Amazon right now, from our work going from the second division to the first division, with behind the content, with the personal part of that, and then the reactions of that. And that's out there now. We're working on new documentary works, because I think it's opening the door, giving voice, showing what a football player is. They're all, nice kids, pursuing their dreams, and what makes the club for them, what makes the club different, how the club and the players work together. I think all that content is something that is definitely out there, and that makes the people not only have a good time when they're watching, but also connect with you emotionally. And that's what brings you that fan base, that what makes your name or your brand grow and increase value.
What is the documentary called?
From Paradise. It's translated in English.
Oh, all right. And in Spanish?
El camino, el ascenso al paraíso.
I will not repeat that because I can't. This episode is sponsored by InSport Education, the online business school for sport. They offer a range of different courses, for example, Foundations of Sport Business, Private Equity in Sport, and much, much more. As a listener to this podcast, you get 10% off all of their courses using the code SportsManagementPodcast10. Click the link in the description below and sign up today. Speaking of behind the scenes, who is Felix Torralba and how did he start out in the world of sports?
That's a good one. It started away from football, actually. It started more in the tennis area, in the tennis business. I was a very bad tennis player, but with a lot of love for the sport. And I ended up being an official. So basically, when you're not good enough, but you're still there all day long. I started officiating when I was age 17. I was very lucky that I could, do my steps in officiating career and joined the ATP, WTA, and the ITF, and I joined promotional team when I was age 21, and then started, traveling around the world for tennis events in professional tennis. And that's where it probably all started with the sports side, right? It's a different approach. It's when you're getting there and they pick you up, the event is set, everything is set, and you just go there like if you would be a part of the player side, of the front office, let's say, of sports. And while doing that was great fun and great experience, because it was incredible international, working with people from all different cultures, and from Asia to South America, Africa, Oceania, like really literally global, and gave me a lot of intrigue and a lot of love for the sport business. And I studied law in Spain, obviously on the road. I traveled a lot with books because it was always fun. Officiating was never meant to be my plan A. It was just something I loved, and that allowed me to travel and to be part of the sports world, and that allowed me as well to continue my studies and my personal, to take the decisions to do everything towards the sports world, because that decision was then already taken. So did my master's then in the US, also while traveling. So lots of travel in the last 20 years. And at one point, it was clear to me that I was very, very attracted by the back office. Now, what you don't see from the sports world, I was allowed by the WTA to participate and lead some very interesting projects where sport is social element for inclusion, for sport as a tool for female promotion, and so those different projects really got me and relied on me that I wanted to go on towards the back office from the court towards the organizing, and then joined company and I was in charge of running an ATP event, so stayed in tennis initially, and then also golf, PGA European Tour, so managing director of those events in Mallorca. So that brought me to Mallorca 5 years ago, and then RCD Mallorca came as an opportunity for me, and didn't doubt it a moment. No? In love with the club, with what they're doing, with where they're going. I think there is a lot of clear vision of where and what the club stands for and where it's heading. And joined this season. So quite excited and learning and enjoying the process.
Wow, what a journey. And it's funny, I had a similar start to my career in sports. I started to play ice hockey, but I was never any good at it. And then I also did some officiating. And then I moved abroad and started my studies. So up until that point, it was pretty similar. But you did a law degree, which is impressive. And how has that helped you now in your current role, you think?
A lot. I think, for people that don't know what to study, I never wanted to practice law. That was never in the plan, not even when I started. But when I started traveling, that was also, and I started very young, age 17 almost, before, going to university and deciding what to do. What was clear for me is that I wanted to work in sports. I had a passion for sports. I think passion is incredibly important in anything you do. So you have to really want something. And law was already part of everything I was doing at age 17, 18. I had to sign a contract with the ATP WTA. I had to process visas. I had, accreditations in terms of agreements. So law is absolutely everywhere, and it definitely has helped me in the way we, when you approach things. Obviously, we have a legal department, that they are the experts. But I think it helps when you're looking at opportunities, also at problems, or also negotiations, to have a bit of an understanding of how it shall look like on structure, on terms. And I think all that has been very beneficial for me. So that legal background I've always been quite proud of. And again, I think it helped me to be where I am today. But then obviously also specialized in studying and getting ready for the sports world through sports management program, master's program in Ohio, in this case, in Ohio University. So I think for me, it was clear that studies and getting ready was extremely important. And it was, in my case, I don't know how ice hockey is, but with tennis, where you're traveling so much, but you also have a lot of time off, and it doesn't matter when you're in Australia or when you are in Indian Wells, you have time. So it's just about how you schedule your time and how you make an effort, to sit down with books instead of, sitting and watching tennis. So not always easy, but it was definitely the right choice.
Of course, I understand that, but that's a good tips for everyone who's listening, just how to maximize your time, that when you're on the road, maybe you can study, and even if you're an athlete, maybe you can pursue an academic career parallel. I
think, and if I'm allowed to say a sentence on that, it has nothing to do with my job, but definitely with the person I am today. I've always taught, and when I was, for example, mentoring other umpires, younger umpires, or young kids coming into the tour, or I think there is always something to learn. Meaning you don't have to go to university or do a master's every year, but you can work on your language skills. You can work on your, digital skills, and there is certification, there is online schools, there is free programs, I think it's incredibly important to generate value personal value as well as professional value, and therefore, maximize. There is always time to do something.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good motivational addition here. Speaking of your career journey, has there been any bumps on the road in your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Well, I think bumps, yes, there are challenges. Challenges, as we mentioned before, lead to opportunity and lead to learnings, right? So there's always some moment where you have a decision that you could have done differently, that you could have been quicker, that you could have foreseen something. But I think a real bump where you say, oh my God, I was cracked on the ground for 2 months, not exactly knowing where to head to. I was lucky enough not to have those situations. But I have situations where I had to take decisions, and leave the comfort of something that you were doing, let's say, well enough, to not be questioned on what you were doing. So leaving comfort, going far, getting out of your comfort zone, all that brings situations where you have to, look at yourself and say, I'm going to go through, and there are times where you doubt, have you done the right decision? I remember when I started my master's in Ohio, sometimes on the road, I had calls at 4 a.m., 3 a.m. I have papers to give in in academical papers, so hard work behind it. And I was anxious, but again, those all brought opportunity. And when I look back, I don't think there was any bigger mistake. There has been a lot of small mistakes, but definitely the bigger decisions have been there in my case, or I'm happy to think, or I like to think that has been the case. And overcoming, again, is thinking also on the short term, because we all want to achieve things, but it starts with sitting down on a table and typing, or it starts with, taking notes, or sometimes we don't know where to start. And the best is to start with the first step. Don't think about the second. And once you go through the first, or sitting at the first step, start thinking about the second step, third step, and so on.
Yeah, I think that the very first episode with Dr. Asimakopoulos, who was associated at that time with the Athens Marathon, I think he also studied at Ohio University in his days.
Well, I think Ohio University is one of the oldest programs in sport. I think it's definitely first in the US. It has 50-something plus years of experience. So I think there was a visionary guy that said sports is going to turn into a great industry, and I think people need to get ready for that. It was a pleasure to be there and to be part of the alumni, and still very, very much in contact.
He was not wrong.
He was definitely not wrong. Visionary, right?
Definitely. So, looking forward now for the future, what is the vision with Real Mallorca?
I think we have a very clear vision of where we want to be. I think, there is always two sides in football. One is what happens on the pitch, the goal in, goal not in, or, there's sporting result that you can only work and keep getting better and improving your job. And also the back office, the back office side. And I think from a back office side, what we have a clear goal and a clear vision that we want to be establishing ourselves, so we'll be considered and make it into this consolidating top 10 position of La Liga. That is where we head to. That is what I think we are in a good path to achieve that. And that is not only on the pitch, it's on the pitch and it's around it. It's the stadium, it's the project, it's the fan base, as we were mentioning before. It's a lot of different aspects and verticals that you have to bring in to consolidate yourself there. And I think that is definitely the goal and the vision for the club.
Sounds interesting, and will be interesting to follow as well. Is there something that I haven't asked you that you want to bring up?
I'm very open. Like you can bring up any question. No, I think from a club's perspective, I think again there is always, and I think that is interesting for people, for the followers. There is always this front side and back side. There is what happens on the pitch, and there is what happens, in the office. Those two things don't necessarily go on the same speed and exactly the same straight in the evolution, but they're both together. So if you do things properly in the back office, usually the results on the pitch are going to come. I think Mallorca is growing incredibly in the last 6 years from a structural point of view. Now we have announced refurbishment plans for the new stadium, which is going to make a huge impact also to the island, but also to the ways fans enjoy the matches now. And both match days, non-match days from the stadium, but also from outside, because the whole viewership experience is going to be different and maximized and better. So I think, those two things is always something to keep in mind when you talk about professionals or sports, or when you think about organizations, professional sport organizations. There is many verticals. I don't put on my shorts and run on the pitch, obviously, but I have an impact on what I do in the office.
Yeah, for sure. And from a financial aspect as well, how well you are managing as a business will affect your profit in the end, and then you can buy better players and then you will perform better on the pitch. So of course, everything is connected.
And take better decisions. It's not only about spending money in players, it's about how you purchase players, how you make players feel welcome at your club so they can perform the best. It's the economics behind it affects not only that initial moment of bringing in talent, but growing talent. How important is it to work on your youth teams, right? To make opportunities available for growing your youth teams, even with international talent as well. So all that affects the economics, and the economics affect what you can perform. So definitely, yes, it's a big part of the whole game, the economic aspect.
If you don't have anything else, that was it from me. So my last question that I ask everyone is, if you could choose the next guest on this podcast, who would you choose?
If I had to choose one, I think I would take a very, very close friend of mine and that I've learned that I admire. He has a vast sports industry experience and knowledge from all different aspects. He's been in PR and media. He has been in event production, and it's a professional called Stephen Duckett, which is now in charge of World Table Tennis Tour. So it's a new sports tour that is developing from Singapore. And he, I think, would be someone you would definitely enjoy interviewing, and that has incredible insights on the sports business from so many different areas he has worked with, and a vast experience, obviously. He's been tournament director in tennis tournaments, PR for the ATP. Very interesting professional, and happy to get you in touch with him if that's something you would like to.
Yeah, definitely. And I recently had an episode with Steve Dainton from the International Table Tennis Federation. But definitely, if we can arrange that would be very interesting.
So this is like what they're doing now is a part of the federation generating the tour, similar to the tennis world, where you have the International Tennis Federation and the ATP or the WTA, and giving it an international approach. So absolutely happy to put you in touch.
That would be great. What do you think about the upcoming Netflix documentary with the ATP tour?
Looking forward to see that. Again, I follow tennis. I have a passion for sports in general. It's also true that when you work in a sports, you stop practicing a little bit. It's, 24 hours is too much. So you really need to, again, as we were mentioning before, take some distance. But I'm very excited. And I think, the same as La Liga is fast growing, and ATP Tour are really doing structural work and efforts in unifying the tennis community together with the Grand Slams and with the Women's Tennis Association in order to maximize the impact of tennis global. So I think they're doing a very good job, becoming from probably the best era in men's tennis, at least with Roger, with Rafa and Nola and so on. So I think it's a great moment, and it's very interesting to follow what the mid and short term will bring to the sport.
Definitely. Felix Torralba, thank you so much for taking the time and to share your incredible story with us and telling us more about the initiatives with Real Mallorca.
It was a big pleasure. It was very good sharing some time with you, and look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.